Individual ministerial responsibility. Individual ministerial responsibility is a constitutional convention in governments using the parliamentary system. The convention requires that a cabinet minister bears the ultimate responsibility for the actions of their department. Individual ministerial responsibility is not the same as cabinet collective responsibility, which states that the members of the cabinet must approve publicly of its collective decisions or resign. This means that a motion for a vote of no confidence can't be brought against the actions of a department if it fails in the proper charge of its responsibilities. This creates a flexible gap between the functioning of the government as a whole and the functioning of the department on its own. Where there is individual ministerial responsibility, the accountable minister is expected to take the blame and ultimately resign. The majority party within the parliament, of which the minister is a part, is not responsible for the minister's failure. Can you think of another practical reason why the majority party should not be liable for the failure of its ministers? What if the ministry is of great importance and is responsible for a national crisis? In this situation, the cabinet will intervene and deal with the national crisis or issue. The Convention of Collective Ministerial Responsibility will then be used as a tool for accountability. Ministerial responsibility basically means that if waste, corruption, or any other misbehavior is found to have occurred within a ministry, the minister is responsible even if the minister had no knowledge of the action. The minister is ultimately responsible for all actions in a ministry because even without knowledge of an infraction by subordinates, the minister approved the hiring and continued employment of those civil servants. If misdeeds are found to have occurred in a ministry, the minister is expected to resign. It is also possible for a minister to face criminal charges for malfeasance under their watch. The principle is considered essential as it is seen to guarantee that an elected official, which is the minister, is answerable for every governmental decision. It is also important to motivate ministers to closely scrutinize the activities of their subordinates within their departments. One rule coming from this principle is that each cabinet member answers for their own ministry in their parliament's question time. The positive side of ministerial responsibility for the minister is that civil servants are not supposed to take credit for the successes of their department, allowing the government to claim them. This ensures that the political party in government can have an incentive to work for the people to create more support for elections in the democratic process. In recent times, ministers frequently use ignorance of misbehavior as an argument for lack of culpability. While opposition parties rarely accept this argument, the electorate is often more accepting. In most other Commonwealth countries, such cases are today hardly ever brought to trial. It is currently unclear what individual action a minister ought to take when a civil servant within his department is guilty of maladministration. The formulation of some guidelines took place during the Crichel Down Affair in 1954, in which the Minister of Agriculture, Thomas Dugdale, resigned, despite an inquiry suggesting that all mistakes were made within his department without his knowledge, and in some cases due to deliberate deceit by civil servants. Later details suggested that he resigned because he supported the civil servants' action, and because he disagreed with the government accepting the inquiry's conclusions. The government announced that ministers must defend civil servants who act properly and in accordance with the policies set out by the minister. Furthermore, it was stated, where an official makes a mistake or causes some delay, but not on an important issue of policy and not where a claim to individual rights is seriously involved, the minister acknowledges the mistake and he accepts the responsibility, although he is not personally involved. In 1982, Lord Carrington, the then Foreign Secretary, and two other Foreign Office ministers resigned shortly after the invasion of Falklands Islands. Later official reviews stated that although there had been misjudgments within the Foreign Office, no responsibility attached to any individual within the government. However, in 1983, when 38 IRA prisoners broke out of the Maze prison, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, James Pryor, did not resign. explaining that the breakout was not caused by any policy initiative originating from him. The latter position has become the norm in British politics. An exception might be Estelle Morris, who resigned as the Secretary of State for Education in 2002, saying she had not done well enough after a scandal over A-level marking. Some recent resignations due to personal errors of judgment or impropriety include the resignation of Ron Davies, the Secretary of State for Wales, for sexual misconduct in 1998, and the resignation of Peter Mandelson, Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, for failing to disclose a substantial loan by a cabinet colleague in 1999. The Premier also has special responsibilities to advise the Queen on the appointment and dismissal of the Governor, advise the Governor on the appointment and dismissal of ministers, either portfolio ministers or delegate ministers, advise the Governor on Executive Council meetings, control the agenda of Cabinet, require matters to be referred to Cabinet, and for the operation of the Cabinet. As the chair of the Cabinet, the Premier can refer matters back to ministers and request the amendment of submissions that do not comply with standards. The Premier also has a broad agency to bind the government in any matter in the ordinary course of the government administration.